Hello, welcome back. So yeah, this is my Saturday video, and we're just covering some different subjects: incarnations, the plan of creation, the three things, God being a person, the soul's journey, other planets, the golden age, and the Lord's pastimes. So we've done incarnations. That went for half an hour. I'm not sure if we'll get through the rest a bit quicker than that. But I'm going to do another kirtan again, and then we'll get into it. Radhe, 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 Govinda, Govinda, Radhe, Radhe, Govinda, Radhe, 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 Govinda, Govinda, Radhe, Radhe, Govinda, Radhe, 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 Govinda, Govinda, Radhe, Radhe, Govinda, Radhe, 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 Govinda, Govinda, Radhe, Radhe, Govinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vajo Giridhari Govinda Gopal. Vajo Giridhari Govinda Gopal. Vajo Giridhari Govinda Gopal. Vajo Giridhari Govinda Gopal. Sitaram, Sitaram, Ram, Ram, Sitaram, 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 Ram, Ram, Sitaram, 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 Ram, Ram, Sitaram, 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 Ram, Ram, Sitaram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha, Giridharadhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha, Giridharadhari. Yashodanandjana Braja Jana Ranjana, Yashodanandjana Braja Jana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Radhe Radhe Govinda, Radhe Radhe Govinda, Radhe Radhe Govinda, Radhe Radhe Govinda. Sitaram, Sitaram, Ram, Ram, Sitaram, 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 Ram, Ram, Sitaram. Hanuman, Hanuman, Jaya Jaya Hanuman, 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 Jaya Jaya Hanuman. Haribol. Okay, So just thought yeah, I'm kind of having a go at freestyling these sort of things. So looking at the plan of creation, there's kind of in the simplest way to understand, there's three things. So there's the spiritual potency, which is God and his abode and his associates and the whole spiritual world and everything. Then there's the marginal potency, which is the jivas, which is what we are, so we're kind of in between. And then the third thing is Maya. So they're the three things that exist. So Maya is like illusion. There's two different types of Maya. There's the Maya that we see around us in the world, the material creation, and then there's the Maya that's in our minds. And of those two types of Maya, one is considered true and the other one is false. So the true Maya is the world around us. In other words, the world does actually exist. It's not this freaky over subjective thing. There is actually an objective world, which also gives validity to scientific knowledge, because it is actually studying an objective reality. So in other words, scientific truths that are verified can be said to be true in a sense, because there is a true Maya. But the Maya that is in our minds is a false Maya, and that is made up of our attachments to things. In the course of Bhakti Yoga is overcoming Maya by surrender to the Lord. That once one surrenders to the Lord, he's under his protection and will rescue one from Maya, the Maya of the mind. So like practically you could see that in terms of meditation, where if you had something like a kirtan, you'd be chanting the names, which are like the spiritual vibration. So that comes from that top one, the spiritual vibration, and we're the jiva, so we're in between. So we can either be attracted to the Maya, or we can be attracted to the spiritual potency. So when we listen to the names of God, because they're absolute and they're spiritual, it can attract our mind towards God and away from the world. So even in terms of a very specific meditation, how you would do that is, if you were chanting, you would listen to the sound vibration, and then if the mind got attracted away to some other particular thing, then you would bring the mind back again and have this continual kind of bringing the mind back to the sound vibration. And that is the Maya that is being taken away. That's the false Maya disappearing. And then as spiritual advancement goes on, even the world around can be seen as to be like spiritual, as also a manifestation of God. So how it's explained is that to the devotee, where the devotee is becomes like Vaikuntha. So you see God in everything. But yeah, so I mean, in terms of the material energy itself, which is around us, you've got all the elements and things. So you've got like water. Essentially, it's made up of like three gunas, which are tamas, rajas, and sattvic. So they're like three gunas that interact in different ways, and they can form all the different things that we see around us. And they also form the heavens and the hells. So you have the hells being in the tamas guna, and then the material creation being in rajas, and then the sattvic being like the heavens and stuff. But the idea is that is all within the realm of the material creation. So samsara, or the cycle of birth and death, is going around and around this cycle where we go through animal bodies and into human bodies and then into like demigod bodies or whatever, and go up into heaven and then come back down again and go back into human bodies, and then maybe go lower into lower species of life and into hells and all this thing. And that's the samsara that the idea of spiritual is to get out of, which is another way of saying to overcome the mind, which is to overcome that part of the Maya which is false. But you can't do that by force. The only way to do that is through surrender to the Lord personally, and He can rescue us from it. So all that's really required is like a humble request, and sincere calling is like basically the main way. That is like Kripalji would say, the essence of all scriptures is just to call God, and to do that you can see the Lord in any form that you choose, and you can call him or her by any name that you choose. But the main thing is just that you sincerely call the Lord, and if you do that, then the Lord will hear and rescue you from the Maya. And then so anyway, you've got the three gunas and stuff that are all in there, and what that's made of is like the body and stuff, which is like earth, fire, water, air. You've got earth, fire, water, air, and then mind, intelligence, and then you've got false ego or ahankara, which is in Swedenborg that's called the proprium. So that's like it's like a hard bony substance on the back of the head. It's made of two things. It's made of ego and conditioning. So if you can overcome your conditioning and then overcome your ego, then the kundalini, it pierces through the thing and it comes out, and that connects you to the spiritual energy. So that's one thing that happens. Actually, it's a real kind of phenomena. You could say it's scientific. So yeah, you've got your 4 elements. There's actually a system of all the elements and stuff in the Indian system as well, which is called basically they've got all the different elements and things as well, whereas in Western science we've got all the essential, what we call elements as well. But it's a different system, and actually cross-referencing those systems would be quite useful as well. But of course all of this is considered material, which is all the elements and stuff that like the body's made of, as well as the mind is also material, and the intelligence. But then through that process of calling God and connecting to the spiritual level, then He gives us spiritual senses and a spiritual mind and spiritual intelligence in order to approach Him. So then you get to the spiritual mind. And Swedenborg, I think he has like 3 divisions of what he calls mind, and you've got the spiritual mind, and then you've got the spiritual mind and the natural mind. He's got one in the middle as well. There's a natural mind, which isn't bad in itself. It's just the lower natural level mind, and then you've kind of got one in between, which can operate in the heavens and hells and stuff like that. And then you've got a spiritual mind, which is spiritual, and that's capable of comprehending spiritual ideas and actually seeing God as well. With the spiritual senses, one can actually see God, but not really with the eyes, unless it was especially revealed with the eyes. It's seen with the spiritual senses. So it's not actually that hard. Like, there's a way to determine if you can see God or not, pretty easily, and it's not really as uncommon as what you would think. It's just people don't generally recognize that they see God, but they do actually see God. But yeah, you see God with the spiritual senses and the spiritual mind. So the plan of creation, you've got in the spiritual realm, you've actually got there's a nice picture in Vaishnavism of the material creation and the spiritual creation. The idea with these three things is that all three are eternal, which means that Maya, all the physical universes and everything, has and always will exist eternally. But the difference is that it is temporary, so it's going through this kind of cycle. It's an emanation from God, so you'd still say God made it, but God made it eternally. So it's still rotating and it's still going, and except for at the end of the creation where he draws it into his body. So, but then he expands it again, so you get like universes coming and going like that. That can be horribly confusing, because the material creation is in space and time, but the spiritual creation is outside space and time. So one actually has to go through the endeavour of removing space and time from his own thinking in order to comprehend spiritually. If one lets space and time and the idea of a time-based eternity enter his mind, then he gets confused. So yeah, there's sort of an ability to actually comprehend spiritual things as being outside space and time. So that's one of the major differences between your material creation, is that it includes time in it, whereas the spiritual manifestation is outside space and time. And then what you have is also, you've got your material, which you could put in the middle, and then you've got the heavens up here, and then the hells. So you could put them like that, with the heavens going up and the hells going down. And then how I would do this is I would put a spiritual platform there with Krishna, and then a spiritual platform down here as well with Balaram or Sankarshan. So he's considered the foundation of the creation. So you could almost view it as a kind of like a giant mechanism, with you've got a material creation in the middle, which is the foundation of the whole thing, and then you've got your subtle and causal realms, by which from the material creation you can dissolve the subtle body into the actual spiritual manifestation. Also with attachments and things that happen down here, you're getting the hells coming in as well. So a person in the material creation can experience heaven or hell while in the material creation, and by engaging in spiritual activity and contacting the spiritual platform, he can also be in the spiritual level. But how it's explained is that the Lord is the only one that knows of that interaction between the physical body, which is in the material, and then your subtle and causal bodies, and then the spiritual platform itself. There's an interaction that happens between them, but the Lord is the only one that really knows of that interaction. So we're kind of, as devotees or whatever, we are just being led by the Lord as subservient, and it's basically a type of pastime that happens. There's a pastime which is the interaction between the spiritual level and the causal and the subtle and the physical level. it all interacts, but only he really knows what's going on there, and it's all just going on like that. So within those heavens and hells, there's like all sorts of different beings and stuff as well. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, there's lots of different beings that are all named. I wouldn't be able to give the details of all of them, but basically there's a lot of different species of life. There's a lot of different bodies that you can go into. So you can, a human body is considered really good because it enables spiritual cultivation. So there's almost like a responsibility that comes along with being a human being, in that we are not like animals, because there's 4 things that animals do and that humans also do. That is, namely, eating, mating, defending, and procreating. So we do that and the animals do that, but what makes us different from the animals is our ability to actually think, I have this body in this life, what body will I have in the next life? So devotional service even goes further than that, because it's considered that a relationship with the Lord transcends even the idea of which body you're going to go into, which would be that you could even go into an animal body in the next life, but as long as you were doing devotional service, then that would still be a success. Or you could go to the actual spiritual realm itself, which is made of 2 levels. You've got like Vaikuntha, and then it's all Vaikuntha, which means free from anxiety, but then there's different levels which you can understand in terms of Krishna's pastimes, in terms of Dwaraka and Vraj. You've got where the Lord did pastimes in Dwaraka, he reigned as a king. So he was a king and he was very opulent and there was lots of things going on. Essentially, he was like a king. So this is one particular realm that you can be in the spiritual world, where everyone understands that God is a king, and everyone knows the king, and they do all their things that they do, which obviously there's occupations, there's places, there's everything like that, but it's all determined by state, which means that like the consciousness of the person has an effect on what the surrounding environment is, and then the surrounding environment is a reflection of the consciousness of the person, but also the places are so arranged as to be under divine order, so it all still sticks in its place, but it's all moved around by the actual state of the person. So this can happen through thoughts or affections. So say in my thoughts, say I was thinking of someone, that would draw me to that person a little bit, but if I had affection for that person, then that would really draw me into their state. So that's how you would move around in this kind of realm. So that's Vaikuntha in terms of the king and the queen, understanding the female manifestation of the Lord, so the king and queen, and then beyond that there's a more intimate kind of thing with the Lord, where you get into the Vrindavan pastimes of Krishna, where he's in the village and stuff. I hope this is adding up, what we were talking about with that the pastimes are actually a manifestation of that spiritual world. So here you can see practically how the pastimes are demonstrating what's in the spiritual world itself. So in these pastimes in the Vrindavan mood, there's more affection of Krishna and stuff, and it's in a more kind of there's all these rasas and stuff like that. But generally how it's understood is that you're only getting like, they're all still sort of examples. Nothing's really telling you exactly what the spiritual world is really like. It's telling you, it's giving you an indication. It's like it's a mild indication of what's there, but you can't really speculate on what it's like exactly. And like I said, there's an interaction that happens, and only the Lord could reveal the actual truth of what the spiritual world was like, or those realms in between, and kind of that would all be between you and the Lord, and how He chose to reveal it to an individual personally. So, in that anyway, is understanding that there's also a realm which is not so much the king and queen sort of level, but more a kind of affectionate hanging out with God sort of thing, where you're more just on a friendly basis and stuff. But they're very big places, and there's a nice picture in Hare Krishna that has 2/3 of the creation is these self-luminous planets. It's completely infinite, so it's like you can't get the vastness of it. But there's a spiritual world, and then there's the material creation, which is only 1/3 of creation. So that's the one with all these different planets and stuff that are in it. So we can go to all these different planets. But even then, we're only in one universe. And like, if you look at Mahavishnu, he's like a gigantic form of God that like lies down on this causal ocean, and universes like come out of the pores of his skin. Like, it doesn't really matter how literally you take that. I actually prefer the literal view that there is actually a giant Mahavishnu and these universes come out. But either way, you can view it scientifically or something like that. But basically multiple universes all coming out, and the Lord, what He does is, when they come out of the pores of His skin, He enters into each universe as another Vishnu, and then there's millions and millions of living entities within that universe, and then He enters into the heart of each one of those living entities. So we all have God as Vishnu in our heart. Vishnu comes from Krishna himself, but Krishna is outside the material creation, whereas Vishnu is within the material creation, but he maintains it. So you have Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva, all of which are God. Brahma creates the material creation, and Vishnu maintains it, and Shiva destroys it. So but that's all still considered within it, even though they're transcendental and they're not affected by it. They have the ability to change it. But yeah, and then you get into different types of Brahmas. Like our universe just has a 4-headed Brahma, so he's got 4 heads. And then there's like multiple headed Brahmas and all these things. So there's lots of different universes, and we're just in this one universe. But you kind of are where your spirit is. So that's why it doesn't matter where you are, because if you have a relationship with God, and then you are on the spiritual platform. You're actually in the spiritual world already, sort of, because you're there in your spirit and mind and heart. And so it's considered better for a devotee to be in the spiritual world itself, because you've got, obviously you can clearly see God and you can see all the things that are going on, and so it's probably much more interesting than here. Maybe, I don't know, there's still quite a lot to do even just on Earth, which is just this one little planet, isn't it? And there's quite a lot to do. Plan of creation, yeah, so basically you've got hellish planets and you've got the middle planets, which is like what we're on the middle ones, and then there's the heavenly planets. So the one that we're on is best for spiritual cultivation, because there's not so many anxieties and torments to make it difficult to practice spiritual cultivation, but there's also not so many pleasures either, because pleasures are also considered like a hindrance to spiritual practice, because you're so busy enjoying all of these things that there's no time to really focus on your spiritual life. And in some ways you can see it as quite beneficial that we have sufferings and stuff, because they get us to turn to the Lord, because we have something bothering us, and there's always some problem going on because we've got a material body. So there's always going to be some form of suffering of one or another. And part of spiritual life is recognizing that we live with this suffering, and so do other people. And you can learn compassion for other people through your own suffering, because through understanding that I'm suffering, I can understand other people are suffering, and so on. So that's kind of the material creation what I wanted to talk about. Essentially everything emanates from Krishna himself. He's got all these different energies and stuff. There's a lot more than just these three. There's heaps of different energies, all these different forms of Shakti, and all these different things that manifest all the different kinds of things, like plants and houses, and all these things are manifest in the spiritual world, and then that's the cause of the material manifestation. So a name for Krishna is the cause of all causes. So he causes everything, he causes even the causes. So, but the spiritual world is the cause of the material world. But the natural world by Swedenborg isn't considered bad or wrong in itself either. Well, in Swedenborgianism, the material creation is considered the foundation of the spiritual platform. So it's like at the Lord's feet. It's like under his feet. So so it's also very good. I mean, God even comes here personally, and he's in a transcendental human body, and actually hangs out and does things with us down here. For you to say, like, down here. So that's sort of one way of understanding the plan of creation. But essentially you just have to understand those three things, that we're in the middle, and then there's the spiritual world, and then there's Maya, which is made of two types, which is the Maya that we see around us, and then the Maya that's in our minds. And so by overcoming the Maya that's in our minds, then we can see the spiritual level to the world around us and become closer. So I don't know if that clarifies creation a little bit. I know I didn't get into how it was created, but I guess essentially it's just emanated. It's all come from God. But you can get into different things like the subjective connection between the person existing and the senses and stuff. Because he's kind of the Lord has made the material creation in view of the human being, because of the human being and the idea of having other people to associate with, other created beings, to give him pleasure and to give us pleasure, is the material creation, and that allows the human being to actually be in the material creation and become spiritual and then exist spiritually. So Swedenborg defines the purpose of creation as to populate heaven. So to populate, which is another way of saying he wanted to actually make beings that could love of their own free will. So we have free will, and there's no purpose to love outside of free will. So you can't force someone to love you, and yeah, I don't know, whatever. That's kind of how it's explained in brief. But it's been half an hour, so I'll cut it off here.